7 o'clock. Let's bring this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Cody, roll call, please.
Supervisor Gunning.
Here.
Treasurer Rice.
Here.
Trustee Hauk.
Here.
Trustee Mikas.
Here.
Trustee Lannon.
Here.
Trustee Worley.
Here.
Clerk Cody here.
All right, that brings us to item 4, approval of agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as is?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Motion and a support. Discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, take it up for vote. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda approved. That brings us to item 5, and I believe this is our gentleman over here, is it?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So this will be Mark Notley, Municipal Consulting Services Compensation and Classification Study.
And while Mr. Notley is coming up, I believe it was 2 board meetings ago, the Board of Trustees approved a service agreement with Mr. Notley's firm, Municipal Consulting Services, Inc., to conduct a compensation and classification study. And you know, the purpose of that was to look at our pay grades, our pay ranges, our benefits for all the positions in the organization, board member, volunteer board member positions, some get paid per diem, election workers, elected officials. And so he came in today. We had a meeting with the leadership of the bargaining group to, and they've been up to speed along the whole way. And so we had a kind of a kickoff meeting with them. And then Mr. Notley is here tonight to kind of spend a few minutes, not kind of, but to spend a few minutes talking about the project and the process. And then as we had talked at the last meeting, there will be a final presentation of the report itself at the conclusion of the exercise. Mr. Notley.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, my name is Mark Notley. This is what I do for a living. I do case studies for townships and counties and cities across the state for about 30 years. I had the pleasure of doing your current system in 2010, so I'm pretty familiar with the township, and I'll get a lot more familiar over the next couple of months. It's about a 90-day time frame to get this study done. That's what we're shooting for. And what I'd like to do is to just take you through the study process very quickly, so you get a sense of what you're getting for your money, for one thing, and just give you an overview of the various tasks that we'll be engaged in to get this study done.
If I could interrupt just for a moment, please. I think for our home viewers, because this program's streamed, if you could stand back there and use that microphone. I know it might not be as convenient for you, but it would be better for our viewers.
I didn't realize you were taping the meeting.
Pardon my interruption, but thank you.
So the outline that I've handed out to you is one we used today with the bargaining leadership. And what I did was to take them through the various tasks. I think it's very important that the employees and certainly union leadership be comfortable with the study process. And the message that was conveyed is that we're going to be very transparent and very open with this study. There's no reason to be anything else. And the final product will reflect that. It will include everything that was collected or evaluated during the study, really from A to Z. In looking at this outline that I passed out, just very briefly, you can see that I've divided the study into 4 phases. And that's probably the simplest way of looking at it. Phase 1 of this study is going to involve getting to know the organization and getting to know the jobs and the job duties of every particular position. it can't be understated that it's very difficult to do this type of study if you don't understand the positions that you're studying. Ultimately, when you go out and look at the labor market to try to come back with salaries, if you don't understand what it is that you're comparing, you're not going to do a very good job. So what we try to do is spend a lot of time on the front end making sure that we have a solid foundation to work from. We started that today, just making sure that we were on the same page in regard to the procedural approach that I'll be using. And I've asked Mark to collect for me a whole variety of compensation-related documentation. I need to see what's currently in place, the old job descriptions, the pay plan that Township is currently using, current salaries, all of the kinds of information that will bring me up to speed on what is currently going on in Union Township in regard to pay and regard to jobs more generally. What employees will be doing is filling out a job questionnaire. The job descriptions, actually, I wrote them back in 2010, and a lot of them haven't been updated. So we're going to be asking the employees to really buttress or increase my understanding of what their jobs are all about through a job questionnaire. I've done this for about 30 years, so I am pretty familiar with what each one of these jobs entails, but there's always something that's unique to a small organization like yours where people wear multiple hats. We've got a lot of utility employees as well, and this will be an opportunity to really get a good, solid understanding of what each one of those jobs is composed of. After these job questionnaires are completed, I'll be back to interview each one of the incumbent employees and go over the questionnaires. There's also going to be a supervisor review process in there to make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what's been submitted and what the duties actually are. And at the end of this phase one, I'm going to be updating all of the job descriptions. So the township will have all new job descriptions as a result of this study updated to 2019. From a larger perspective, at the end of this phase one, I'm going to understand these jobs inside and out and upside down, probably better than I want to in writing those job descriptions. But that will allow us to go on to phase two, which is looking at the market. I started talking to your township manager today about who we might use as market comparables. I started out with the list that we used in 2010. I added some communities to that list. I deleted a couple of others. I included information on current populations, taxable valuation, and at his suggestion, I'm going to be adding additional information on whether they have utilities that are similar to yours. Ultimately, what we're looking for is to get a list of about 12 communities that share a lot of the organizational attributes that you have, and also similar population typically translates into similar organization structure, something that we can get a good solid comparison from. I think in some cases we're going to find communities where they have some of what you have but not other parts of it. So we'll probably have to do some supplemental survey work as well. After we've completed the actual process of deciding who the market comparables are, and I know you'll be kept aware of this, I'll go ahead and put together a custom survey. We're going to be looking at salaries for all of the positions, as Mark noted. We're also going to be looking at wages and per diem and the like for election workers, board and committee members, board of trustees, elected officials. So we're going to get a full gamut of information. Also a lot of information related to employee benefits. That's going to be going into the report in such a way that it'll be laid out in a narrative for you so I can give you my thoughts on where you're high or where you're low, what we see as emerging trends, the kinds of things that might be useful to you in terms of understanding what you have, how you compare, and where you might change or look for additional efficiencies in the future. So at the end of this phase 2 process, all of these survey data pieces are going to come back from these communities. They're going to get tabulated, and we're going to have everything we need to go on to phase 3. And in phase 3, we'll be putting together a new pay grade structure. Now currently you have the pay grade structure from 2010 that's been updated periodically. Pay ranges have been updated for inflation over the years, but things get out of sync. Jobs change, duties change, and certainly the market is going in its own direction. So what we will be doing here is taking my understanding of the jobs and the organization, as well as all of this market data, creating a new grade structure, which may be somewhat different than the one you have now. Jobs might be in different grades. We won't know that until we get to this point. The pay data that we collect will be used to develop new pay ranges that will be 2019 updates for our new pay grade structure. At the end of phase 3, we will have that structure done, and that is really the foundation, the centerpiece of this whole study. That's what's going to be going forward as your new pay system. What I won't be doing is implementing that pay grade structure. I wouldn't presume to spend your money. That's going to be a board decision. What I will be doing is creating a lot of cost analysis for the report that shows you the advantages of different approaches for implementation, that shows you how positions fare in relation to the labor market, which are high, which are low, how you stack up as an organization overall, and probably more than you want to read. These reports are usually about 100 pages long. But it will be very readable, and it will also be set up as a system. So going forward, administration will be able to view the report, and in fact any employee or the board or any member of the public can read this report, and it will include every bit of evaluation, results, recommendations, survey data. Literally everything is going to be included. From administration's perspective, in the future, the tools that are included in the report will be available for reclassifications, for slotting new positions into the pay grade structure. There'll be instructions for doing that. There will also be instructions for updating this pay structure each year to keep it current. And what we're seeing right now, I think as most of you are aware, is that the labor market's getting very tight, and salaries are going up faster than inflation actually right now, about 3.2%, the last increment that I saw coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as opposed to about 2.4 on CPI. So things are getting tighter, and the markets are responding, and people are getting pay raises. So you couldn't have done this at a better time, and I don't mean that in terms of giving pay raises. I mean that in providing you with an understanding of what others are paying, so that going forward you'll be able to keep your best people, and you'll be able to attract those that meet your specifications as an employee. You're a growing community. I'm really impressed when I look at the population numbers from 2010 till now. It's incredible that you're growing that quickly. You're going to see changes in your organization undoubtedly to meet that service demand. And this is going to be an important part of it in terms of not so much paying salaries at an exorbitant level, but understanding the market and seeing where you sit relative to others. That's the most important thing about this project. You're going to have information available to you as a board for informed decision making. And we'll do our best, and I'll do my best to make sure that you get a quality report that reflects that. So I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have about the project or anything else.
Mark, what is your time frame on completion?
We're looking at 90 days,
90
and
days, okay.
and last time around we were able to do it in 90 days. As long as the surveys come back and we don't have to hound those people too much to get a response, we'll have it in your hands in 90 days.
Okay.
You're going to do comparables for all job classifications?
Yeah, and there might be some that, when we do these studies, typically I get good market data for about 70% of the classifications. The rest of them we go through a process called point factoring to slot the positions into particular grades based on internal equity. But I would think we'll get at least 70%. When it comes to the elected officials, committee members, elections, all of those specialist positions, we'll have 100% feedback. We usually get a good response, and I would say 100% on everything, but I know there's some unique positions that are going to just be specific to your organization. I haven't seen them all yet, but that always proves to be the case.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, that moves us on to item 7, which is going to be public comment. This is going to be restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda only, and this is an opportunity for comments only. Questions to the board will not be answered at this time. Would anyone like to come up for public comment?
Hi, my name is Paul Blanco. I'm an attorney with Martin O'Hackett, O'Neill & Klaus here in Mount Pleasant. We have submitted to the board a request for the board to take certain action on developing a platted area in Union Township. I believe you should have a map with your materials. Basically what it is if you're heading north on Old Mission Road, and then it T intersects with East River, I believe it is, and there's a party store there, and you make a left turn, a couple houses on each side of the street, and then there's, just before the golf course on the north side, there's a undeveloped parcel, just sort of wooded area. It's owned by a client of ours named Four Hacks LLC, and they would like to build some condominiums on it, a couple houses that they're going to condominiumize. In order to do that, they need to develop over where streets and alleys were originally platted. This is the Village of Isabella City plat, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. Anyway, those streets and alleys were never developed. And in fact, some of the streets that are there don't exactly match where they should be on the plat, as it turns out, because that thing was done a long time ago. But the area that my client is specifically looking at, their portion, that undeveloped area, is just grass. I don't think anyone's ever used any of those streets and alleys that were marked out. In order to do this, we need to do two things. First, we need to take an action in circuit court where we have to name all interested parties within 300 feet of the property, which turns out to be about 67 defendants and some state defendants that are required as well, and Union Township. This process is called vacating the plat, which is terminating the public's interest in those streets and alleys and also permitting us to alter the plat map itself. The court will issue an order saying we may alter the plat map by taking out the streets and alleys within my client's section of that thing, nothing else. The other side is called abandonment, vacation and abandonment. Abandonment is where municipalities or government agencies give up their interests in the platted streets and roads. And that's the road commission technically, but the road commission has a requirement that the township be okay with this too. And I was discussing it with your attorney, Matt, because both of us were a little uncertain about the legal reasons for doing this in the statute, because the statute is impenetrable. But effectively, if one organization gives up their rights, it may devolve to the other organization. So if the road commission were to give it up, it may come to you. If you were to give it up, it may come to the road commission. And in fact, we don't really know going back in history when this thing was done, whether or not these streets and alleys that were dedicated were actually adopted in. So we're doing this to be absolutely certain and safe that when we do this, someone can't later come back and say, oh, by the way, you know, the township maintained an interest after the road commission abandoned, or vice versa. So the way the road commission has it set up, I have this abandonment petition. I get signatures from a certain number of people who live around the area, 8, I believe. Try to get all the adjoining property owners too, for technical reasons with the road commission. And we submit this, but first we submit it to you. So what you have in front of you today are two things. One is for the action in the circuit court, there's a consent that you consent to what we're doing in terms of vacating, right? That's because you are one of the public, basically, I guess. In that regard, you're an easement, possible easement rights holder. Your attorney, Matt, tweaked the consent language that we sent out to everyone to note that you consent to us doing this thing, altering the plat, but you don't give up any easement rights if you have any. I'm unaware, frankly, because I've been up to my neck in this for a long time, that you guys actually have any easement rights there, but if you do, they're preserved. We did a title search, and I'm unaware that Union Township actually has any specific easements there. But in any event, any easements would be preserved. So there's the consent for the circuit court action, the vacation, and then there's that petition for the abandonment that will, if it's approved, the next step I do is I turn to the road commission. I say, well, township approved, would you please schedule a meeting on this? And then the road commission has its own meeting, gives public notice, and does that. So it's a very cumbersome process. It takes a long time. It involves notifying a lot of people and dealing with a number of state agencies and a couple local, you guys in the road commission specifically. The county and the drain commission don't seem terribly interested in this matter, but it's probably more personal to you guys than anyone else, frankly. So I don't know how you handle questions, but if anyone has any questions about what's involved in development, who's doing it, what they're doing, that sort of stuff, I can answer it to the best of my knowledge. But legally, all I'm doing is sort of clearing the legal description ground area. Later, when my client wants to develop, they'll have to come here with a site plan for approval. That's a whole separate, and I'm not actually privy to how big the houses are going to be or where they're going to sit or that sort of stuff. I honestly don't know, but I do know who's involved and who's likely to be doing the work and all that sort of stuff. All right?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Sorry if I took more time. I was trying to
That's all right.
cram
We
it
need
all
a
in
little-
there.
We got a full house tonight, so
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment at this time? If not, we will close public comment and we will move to reports and board comments. The first item on our list here is going to be a ZBA appointment. We do have one vacancy on the full-time seats on the ZBA. Taylor Sheehan Stahl has sent his application in and would like to move from an alternate, which he's been an alternate for I think at least, I want to say 3 years, minimum, I think, because I think he was on before this board came to be.
Probably 2.
Is it 2?
Yeah.
I can't remember if he
It would be
started that
2
first year.
because he would have replaced either Norm or I.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
so he would like to go into the full-time seat. I've watched his decision-making process. I think he's a very solid young man. He's on the Mount Pleasant Public School Board as the secretary. Very community involved. So I love to see young people want to get involved with government and the well-being of their fellow citizens. So at this time, I would like to nominate Taylor Sheehan Stahl for, these are what I think, these are 2-year term or 3, CBA?
3.
3-year term, so this would be expiration date, let's see, he's be taking
22.
a 12/31 slot, so this would be pushing it to 12/31 of 2021.
He's taking over Paul Gross's
Yes.
position. Okay. So, right, so we go to 12/31.
21.
21, okay. Well, I would make a motion that we accept the appointment of Taylor Sheehan Stahl to be placed upon the the ZBA with a term expiring on 12/31/2021.
Support.
Motion and a support. So, further discussion on Taylor? No? All in favor of appointing Taylor Sheehan Stahl for a 3-year term expiring 12/31/2021 on the Zoning Board of Appeals, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We do have one alternate slot vacant now, so we will, in the next round, I guess, continue to look for somebody to fill that vacancy. So thank you all. And let's move to board reports. We'll start with Tim.
Yeah, I had a quick meeting the other night with the I attended the Isabella County Board of Commissioners organizational meeting on January 2nd. And it was their kickoff meeting of the year. They went through and adopted without change their bylaws and rules of procedure. They elected their board chair and their vice chair for the year, and that's George Green as the chair and Jim Horton as the vice chair for 2019. They also approved their schedule of board meetings for posting, and then they went through and placed on the various committees and chairperson appointments, the commissioners on a whole host of committees and standing boards, and actually that was posted in the local newspaper today and took up half a page of the newspaper, so at your convenience you could go online or read the printed copy and see where they all landed. And that was the meeting.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Bill?
Yeah, Ben and board, I attended 2 meetings yesterday for the board. The first one was the Citizens Task Force on Sustainability. We met yesterday afternoon and we discussed possibility of working with the township, working with the county MRF to get some more information on the quality of our recyclables that's picked up at the street side, and educational opportunities to try to build up that participation level in that, and briefly discussed a meeting later in the month that our Public Works Director will be attending regarding a county-wide electronic waste proposal that's being kicked around by some entities, including the county and the DEQ. And those are some of the key things that we discussed, along with membership. We'll be seeing a couple of membership applications coming up for that committee. Also then later yesterday in the evening, the Sidewalk and Pathways Prioritization Committee met, and I was present at that meeting. We reviewed a bylaws and procedure template for the committee so that the committee action will be in line with other committee structures and bylaws that we have here under our umbrella at the township. And also we talked about some goals for 2019, including sidewalk easements, some site plan, looking at site plans. Of course, we don't have any authority over site plans, but just being more knowledgeable about upcoming site plans as far as they relate to sidewalks and pathways, and also our more involvement with the Mid-Michigan Pathways Committee that it has some projects in the area. We've worked with them. This board has worked with them in the past as well. Our next meeting tentatively is February 4th at 6:30. So they'll probably meet. I won't be attending that sidewalk committee meeting because I think we have our policy governance training that evening.
Mhm.
That's all I have to report.
Okay, all right. Bill?
I haven't attended any meetings.
All right. Kim?
I'm good for now.
All right. Norm?
I haven't attended any meetings either. There was nothing over the holiday.
Lisa?
The city of Mount Pleasant has 2 new city commissioners, Amy Perschenbacher and Pete Tolis. I don't know if I said that correctly, I'm sorry if I didn't. And then the new mayor is Will Joseph and vice mayor is Lori Gillis.
All right. Very good. No EDA this, in between last time and now, so, with that, we close item 8, move to item 9, which is consent agenda. So we'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion? No? Payables have been checked? Yep. Good.
Yes, they have. I went
Okay.
through those and found no discrepancies with the warrants to be paid.
All right. So, seeing no more discussion, this would be to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We move into new business. And the first item is going to be item A, which is to consider the approval to consent to revise plat and approval of a petition for abandonment to facilitate the development of property owned by 4 Hacks LLC.
Thank you. This is on, the paperwork on this item begins on page 24 of your agenda packet. There's a memo that I wrote that described the 2 actions that are being taken tonight. I'm not going to try to repeat what Mr. Blanco stated. He did a much better job than I could have done. And I was really glad he was here. But everything he said representing, you know, keeping in mind that he represents the property owners. Worked with him and our attorney on this item, both parts, the abandonment and the vacation part. There are maps in your packet at a high level, a more granular level, where, for instance, on page 27, where it shows where the originally platted streets would have been if they would have been developed. As was indicated, there's just grassland there now. In your packet also is the petition that was referred to by the 7 or 8 individuals that was submitted as it relates to the county board action. So I will just stop there, and if you have any questions for myself or Mr. Blanco, would be happy to answer those. And I just would point out that in your motion, if you pretty much follow the action requested, it talks about the 2 items. 1 vote sufficient as long as you make the motion dealing with both items. Thank you.
I would make a motion that we consider approval to consent to revise the plat and approve of a petition for abandonment to facilitate the development of property owned by 4 Hacks LLC, and to further authorize the township manager to sign all related documents.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
I'm familiar with that area out there, and I think this would be a nice project for that to go up there. I mean, it brings in some additional housing options for folks. Obviously increases our tax basis as well. And if you know that area, you know, there are some condos over along the country club there as well. So, you know, it's very congruent then with what's already existing in this. So I see it as just a really good project that fits in nicely to the existing.
Be nice to see that area cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's always just been kind of scruffy looking, but it'll look better now.
Yeah.
Who's going to carry the liability on the range balls hitting houses?
Excuse me?
Who's going to carry the liability on the range balls hitting houses?
Oh.
Isn't that the back of the driving range?
Yeah, you know, okay. There's kind of a buffer. I think there'll be sort of a tree buffer between it and the golf course. I wandered out there this summer in 95-degree heat dressed in business wear, worrying about ticks and whatnot, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out where the property ended and began. They're gonna have to survey the place out, because I don't know when they last did that. But they're right next to a spot that's got a power station. So
Yeah,
I
there's like
think
this
that
little
area-
substation across the
Yeah,
street, yeah,
So I
okay.
imagine that area is safe.
Yeah.
I don't know about behind it.
Right.
Gotcha, gotcha. So any concept, just out of curiosity, Village of Isabella City, so how far does this go back?
You know, I don't know that I've seen the entire plat map. What's this area? I'm not from here. I'm not from Michigan even. So some of these things are kind of new to me still, but referred to as Dogtown?
Dogtown, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, my understanding of the plat is that we're at the western edge of it, and it goes eastward, I believe, up to Mission Road, but don't quote me on that. And I don't know how far north it goes.
It looks like it butts up against Memorial Gardens, man.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
Memorial Gardens
Yeah.
is one of the,
Yeah.
parties because they're so close by.
Right.
We might butt up against Memorial Gardens in one portion of it, but there's a couple other properties to the north of us that also.
So you guys really aren't sure how many years back, this, 1800s, early 1900s,
It's around
or,
the turn of the century.
okay,
Around, for some reason, 1902 sticks in my head, but again, I've been looking at a lot of documents for a long time now.
okay. And you know why it's called Dogtown, right? You don't? Should we,
I don't even know why it is.
The small houses that were there resembled dog houses.
dog
Is that
houses,
why?
yep, that's one
I
story,
never
and
knew
then the
that.
other
Yeah,
story
there's
was, is that there was
everybody
dogs
dogs.
laying
Yeah.
everywhere, so.
There are dogs
Oh,
all over the place.
yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. You know, it's
Dogtown.
one of the mysteries of Mount Pleasant is why that's called Dogtown. On
That's
top
right.
of the
There are
reason,
still some very
where
small-
the mountain is the other question, so.
There are some very small places over there.
Right.
I know how old they are.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice to see that area get developed, and I think that's gonna help the property values all along that stretch.
Exactly.
So, yep, very good. And the diner's gonna go get probably a lot more business too, which they, I from what I understand, they don't really need, because it's always busy. So, all right, any further discussion? Tim?
Yeah, I just have a technical question, I guess. Due to platted roads and easements to municipalities and governments, do these government entities currently have ownership of that property where the roads are platted? Would that be a giving away of property to a,
No, it's a right
Investment
of way, is I think it's more accurate to describe it as. I'd always been taught that you own the property to the center of the road line, subject to the right of way of a municipality. I don't know if that's the best statement of the law on this point, but no, it's not giving up actual property that the township owns, it's giving up rights to develop it into a road. If that helps.
Mhm. All right.
And I would clarify, it's just for the portions in the plat, we're not asking for like the
Correct.
entire section
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
road, it's bounded. There's a legal description there, you can see where it's bounded on the, you know, north edge of the plat, or where it hits Craig Hill Road, or things like that, then it ends, the vacation ends where it hits other established roadways and other properties.
I do believe you said there are no current physical structures on this particular parcel, is that correct?
No, to my knowledge, no. When I went out there and wandered around, all I saw were some surveying stakes that someone had placed a long time ago. I didn't see any power lines going into it. I didn't see any structures on it. I know there was an issue with a neighbor to the north, Mr. Haynes, some years ago about a shack of some sort that he had that my client said was built on their property, and they came to a resolution where they did a little swap. This was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And we actually had that northern line just resurveyed about 2 months ago to make sure that where Mr. Haynes's his man house was located was fine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Ready to put up for vote? All right. So this is going to be to approve to consent to revise the plat and approval of a petition for abandonment to facilitate the development of property owned by 4 Hacks LLC. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does carry. And we move on to item B. And this is going to be to consider the approval of a resolution setting the FY 2019 annual salary for the officers composing of the Township Board.
So this item is on page 39 of your agenda packet, and recognizing that when the board approved the appropriation resolution, the various salaries were stated in that resolution. They were approved at that time. And then as I was looking back through some of the paperwork from a year ago, I discovered that the board had taken similar action a year ago on these positions, and then I kind of wondered why and looked back at my own notes, and there is a clause within the statute that gives the electorate, the citizens, the right to petition if they object to the salary pay levels of the elected officials. And there's an opinion out there that in order to be fully informed, these pay levels should be in a standalone resolution as opposed to maybe part of other business that's coming before the board. So in the interest of abundance of caution, this is brought before you tonight. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if that explanation wasn't satisfactory.
Since we've approved them in the budget earlier action, I'd make the motion to approve this resolution setting the fiscal year 2019 annual salary for offers, I should say for the officers composing the Township Board.
Support.
Motion and support. Discussion? Seeing none, we put this up for vote. Now, with it being a resolution, do we need to have this as a roll call?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so Clerk Cody?
Supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Micus,
Yes.
Trustee Lannon,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes.
All right. Motion carries. Salaries approved. And we move on to item 11, which is going to be extended public comment. This is restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. And again, this is an opportunity for comments only. Questions to the board will not be answered at this time. Seeing no one here, we would close extended public comment. We'd move on to item 12, which would be manager's comments.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Just by way of update, the Isabella water admin remodel is well underway. The original projected completion date was January 24th. That's been moved back to February 1st. So there was lost 1 week in there, primarily due to the holidays and trying to get some approvals related to that project. So that's coming along well. I am going to be out now that we have winter coming up, which is when I normally take some time off for snowmobiling. I am scheduled to be out of the office the week of January 13th through the 20th, which is next week, and I'll send out an email on this as well. And in my stead, since I'll be out of the area, Kim Smith, the Public Services Department Director, will be acting as the Township Manager. Then in the month of February, the week of February 16th, I'm also scheduled to be out, again, snowmobiling up north during that week, and again, there'll be other notifications. Finance Director, Ms. Teal, Sherry Teal, will be acting as the Township Manager since I'll be out of the area. And then my last trip is scheduled for the week of March 8th, at which time, for that week, it'll revert back to Kim Smith, Public Services Department Director. So there's just kind of a rotation going on there. There are no board meetings either of those 3 weeks that I'm scheduled to be out. And then lastly, an update. or maybe communication is a better word. You may recall the various Michigan Tax Tribunal cases that are outstanding, about 7 of them. Happy to report that the ones related to the Union Square and Deerfield Village apartment complexes have been settled at the recommendation of the attorney, Dave Revore, and our assessor, Mr. Priest. So that takes, there's 3 parcels that are involved in those 2 complexes, 2 docket numbers, if you will, that are associated with it. And the amount that was originally in contention when you just add up all 3 was $2,882,000 of taxable value. That's what the petitioner was claiming when they were overassessed by, from a taxable value point of view. The settlement was for the 2 of those go away, there's no change in the value. And the third, which was the biggest one, was there was an agreement that $823,000 would come off the taxable value, as opposed to the request of $2,882,000. So it was the settlement was roughly a third of what the petitioner thought they deserved. From a tax dollar perspective, if for our 3 mills, if everything would have gone the petitioner's way, our 3 mills, we would have lost approximately $8,500. And with this settlement, our loss is closer to $2,400. And so that's just, there's no action needed. There's just this is just by way of update. The other ones we're still going through discovery processes, and we'll undoubtedly be getting some full valuations for our own side for some of those. So, and then the last thing is just a question, and I just want to make sure I'm on the same page as the board. At the last meeting, the recreational marijuana issue came up. There was no motion made. I understand that. I don't plan on taking any additional action on that. But there were a couple questions that came up that made me pause and just want to make sure I'm on the same page. It felt like there were comments made along the lines of it might have come up for consideration if the language that was used was a little softer, and or if there were durations set on the time frame where there would be no businesses allowed. I just want to make sure that that wasn't a signal, if you will, that you wanted me to bring this back in a different form for further consideration. I don't think it is, but I thought I needed to ask.
Yeah, I wouldn't be asking for that.
Okay.
Me neither.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Oh.
I am concerned about our potential exposure by not doing anything. In terms of recently, Traverse City and I think Ithaca have both had the opt-out option, and their boards approved that. And they're opting out until they've had a chance to review the state mandate once it comes in about a year, supposedly. That at that time, then they would review if they want to opt in or not. It's a conservative approach. The other issue that came up too that I believe Lisa had mentioned was about the PC and our zoning ordinances. You know, what do we do in the meantime in terms of preparing ourselves both to regulate and to protect our community as well, you know, in terms of this. I'm a bit uncomfortable with the fact that we've done nothing, to be quite honest with you. I understand the semantics. I understand the, wanting to have some type of an end date, not to have this to be indefinite, that we could have an actual date attached to a new motion, or there might be that it would be upon the board's evaluation of the state mandate to determine then approval to go forward on this. I think that it would give us time to also have folks come in so we can review the pros and cons of the marijuana recreational within our community. There is a lot of controversy. I'm not going to go through all the facts and figures, both pro and against. So I think that for me personally, I think we owe it to our community in terms of the safety and the well-being of our community that we at least be prudent in how we go about dealing with this matter. And because I think that if in the next year there might be people that might already be looking for, say, looking at properties or places for potential establishments, thinking that since we haven't done anything, that we're going to opt in on this. It will be a whole lot easier to allow people to come in upon our discretion and our regulations rather than having to get someone out because we're not going to go along with it. I just think I did not make the motion last time because I was hesitant with the probation. I didn't like the semantics. I agreed in terms of the end date that there should be some type of a termination to it. But I think it would be smarter to, while we're in this holding period anyway for 1 year, to give us some time to, we opt out. We have an opportunity to really discuss it prudently, diligently, in the best interest of the community, hear community input, have professionals come in here, safety, people that have dealt with this before, and then we can always opt in. But I think to do nothing, I'm just concerned that we're exposing ourselves to some potential problems here. That's how I see it. So if it were up to me personally, I think it would be the right thing for the township and for the residents and for the board to consider or at least have the discussion about the opting out, which doesn't mean we're opting out for good. I'm not suggesting that. I just want to make sure that we're protected during this 1 year holding period to make sure that at the end of the day, that whatever we decide, it's the right decision and it's based on our terms and conditions, not something that's being forced upon us. So that's my take on it. So I need to say.
Are you talking just recreational or medical and recreational?
Well, we've already opted out of the medical.
We did?
Well,
I don't think we did.
Well, we opted out. We've opted out by not opting in.
Taking any action.
But some communities, it's a good point, Bill, some communities are actually taking the stance of opting out, even though that isn't the requirement, but they're having a resolution to opt out until they have time to evaluate it. With the recreational, in this case, it's the opposite. If you do nothing, you basically have opted in. So in order to prevent things moving along in that direction, we have to opt out on the recreational. So I think it's a prudent thing to do. I think that, whatever the board decides is fine, but I just wanted to make my stance on this. I just think that to do nothing is a disinterest in terms of our community at this point in time.
Well, I'd like to put a date on it if you do it.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, I think we give it 1.5 years, go to June 26th would be half year, basically.
To reevaluate it at that time.
Oh, wait, this is June 26th of this year. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we'd have to be talking about
A year and a half.
2020.
Right.
Well, how
Or,
about
or
if
it
we
could be
just-
that until we know, until the state mandates are supposed to be within about a year, that they're gonna be coming out in some time in terms of what the regulations will be, et cetera. From what I understand, they're gonna be very, very, extensive in terms of regulations, very conservative with the regulations. So I think, what the right thing to do is that when we get those regulations, for us as a board to review them and to make sure that this is indeed the best way for us to go. Again, if it's not, then we always have the option to continue with keeping the opting out. But if we decide differently, you can always opt in. It's not like it's etched in stone once you opt out. It just gives us this period of time. It protects the township. Because right now, I think we're exposed and I think we're vulnerable. That's the way I see it.
Norm, I think you take a prudent position. We do have some time in front of us to, and I think we should, really spend appropriate time to investigate what we can learn about both the recreational and medical marijuana situations. There's many facets, you know, to each of them. It's more than just going to the store and buying marijuana. There's transportation, there's growing security, there's a whole lot involved. And my estimation, this is the eureka ahead of us as far as what is the biggest thing going in the terms of revenues that for new business startups. As it moves forward, I don't really think there's going to be many people in it for a sustained period of time that aren't going to be backed very strongly by some large financial folks. So I think doing our best effort to understand the marijuana acts that are out there, try to learn what is going on, looking at the zoning issues, you know, contemplating if indeed we end up supporting the operations in the marijuana area, what makes sense, what zoning needs to take place, where locations make sense. And I really do agree that, you know, an appropriate amount of time should be put forth in this area. There's no question there's a significant amount of people who want the availability to medical and or recreational marijuana available. And I agree, it's very prudent to do our homework and try to position the township in a defendable situation, whichever way things turn out.
You mentioned the zoning ordinances, and right now the PC is in the process of, now that the master plan's been completed, they're now going to be looking at the zoning ordinances as well. You know, in that period of time, it's both opportunity for them to look at, if we opt in, where do we want to have it placed, what are the regulations, how it will be zoned, regulated, etc. If we decide to opt out, then how do you prevent that from coming in as well? So it gives the planning commission time, it gives us time. I'm always one to err on the side of caution on something this impacting for a potential impact on the community, you know.
I think Tim, Phil.
Oh, no, go ahead, I'll wait.
I was gonna say, I think Tim brought up a very valid point, is that, I think it would be prudent, if we talk prudent, I think it'd be prudent to maybe have, an educational opportunity with both the planning commission and the board of trustees, and to get a lay of the land, maybe even understanding too what Mount Pleasant has already done. I do think we're a little bit late on this thing. I think that maybe we could have been a little bit more proactive on this issue, as Mount Pleasant's already basically prepared and ready for the medical, and we haven't really done a good job, I don't think, of of broaching it. I would be in favor of learning more about it first before, because we have plenty of time to make a judgment on an ordinance or resolution. I think we've got a year, but I would say that maybe we should try to do something in the short term in regards to having somebody come in and educate us, both boards, so we can all look at this intelligently. That would be my take. Bill?
I think that indeed we have time on our side to prepare. We could, one option I think this board has is to direct the Planning Commission through the zoning revisions to address the issue. Where would, distribution establishments be? What parameters would be necessary for approval of that? The growing units as well. Growing businesses need some guidelines as to where they can position themselves in our township. So I think that's where our energies, our township energies, should be directed now when we have this time open, is to create those parameters in our ordinances that would describe where they would be allowed.
I'd like to see if we're gonna have, just say, an education period on it. I'd like to see someone from law enforcement to see what they have to say. I've had a couple of discussions with Sheriff Maine, and he said he'd be willing to come and talk to our board. There's a lot of things that I'm sure he knows that we haven't heard. So I think it'd be, someone like him. It doesn't have to be him. It can be.
Yeah. I think it's important to just note that an opting out at this point isn't a finality. You're simply giving yourself time that in that period of time we're not exposed and we're not vulnerable to something coming in that we might not be able to deal with. I mean, people might be looking at, say, for example, buying some property within the intent that they may want to be growers. So they make this investment thinking that since we have not opted out, that we're going to be involved in this. I worry that some people might be moving ahead, looking for facilities or looking for places where they might grow or whatever. I think it just gives us the time. I agree with the education. Having law enforcement, having people that maybe a community where they've already been doing some medicinal. You have Mount Pleasant come in here and talking about what they've set up for themselves. I'd like to hear the facts. I think it's a very, there's potential to it, both good and bad. And I think that, again, and for the safety and well-being of our community, that's our role, is to make sure that we make a prudent decision on something like this, And I don't think it's too late. I think there's opportunity that's going to continue to go on with this. So just because one community is already ahead on one thing, like I say, Traverse City is opted out at this point, so is Ithaca. So it's not like, it's not like we have to rush on board with this. I think we just want to make sure that when we do it and how we do it should be a very thoughtful decision.
Yes, Jim?
One group that I would certainly think would be a group to contact would be the Michigan Township Association state folks. Their legal department has been trying to understand the matter for a long time. Probably over a year ago, one of their legals came and presented in the county here to the township associations and other municipalities. Very solid presentation. I'm sure there's much to add from that point in time. And I don't know if any of you have looked through any of the township conference materials that are coming up. There's many sessions that they have prepared for and other speakers have prepared to talk about this subject to the township groups that go down to the conference. It is going to be a very prevalent topic of discussion. So I think there's a strong knowledge base that we could draw off of to help us with the matter.
Let's see, tomorrow at 1:45, and I'm gonna actually try to slip over and see, this is the Michigan Association of Township Supervisors has got, they're actually at the Soaring Eagle, today and tomorrow. And at 1:45 to 2:45 is, from a law firm in East Lansing that handles township, Fahey, Schultz, Bursich, and Rhodes is doing legalization of commercial marijuana and the budding impacts on townships.
There's also a very good podcast that we had gotten. I was listening to it yesterday. It's about a half hour long. It was the from the Michigan Township Association. It's a Township Talk podcast, and it's questions regarding there's a lawyer presenting both the medicinal as well as the recreational. It's about a half hour long. It's a good thing to listen to. A good deal more information. I was listening to yesterday, and that's also what prompted some of the concerns that I'm speaking about tonight.
And just one thing, and I want to ask our assessor, Morticia DePriest, but doesn't our attorney that handles our David Bravor, doesn't he do presentations on?
Yes, he does.
Okay. And that might be a possibility since we already deal with it. Yeah.
Discussion with him, I'm not sure he's the right exact one, but.
Okay.
Yeah. And over the course of a year, we can have folks coming
Yeah.
in and just dialoguing and just
Yeah.
getting the information.
Well, I think this is something we've got the luxury, obviously, of some
Yeah.
time on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have to jump to anything right now at this moment, but maybe, I always kind of feel like if there's an impending deadline, it kind of makes you move a little faster. So if we know we've got 12 months, then, let's put the impetus in trying to get this started. And
So-
we can always look at June or July for what we're trying to propose here.
Well, my hearing then from the board maybe to have that have Mark do the opt-out, but it was both in terms of, again, the semantics. We didn't want to have that prohibition. It has a funny connotation and misunderstanding perhaps attached to it. And to have a end date, and whether that be an actual date or it could be upon our evaluation and review of the Michigan marijuana mandate when it comes down, when it's available. However you want to do that, but I would think we should consider at least a year. You said a year and a half. I mean, and then the other is that we also have have the zoning this planning commission look at our zoning ordinances, both whether we have it or don't have it, so we're prepared either way, and have them certainly involved in some of the educational aspects of it as well. So am I hearing, because Mark had asked the question, we're just going to drop it, or are we saying then we'd like to go ahead?
I'm not agreeing to the opting out
No.
because the voters chose to do it, but I mean, I'd like to get more information because maybe I would. But, the informational thing,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
So
Can I try to?
Yes, sir.
So here's where we're at and where we were going. As of the last meeting, since the board did not choose to opt out. With that being said, the administration is going to be going about the business of creating through a process, the zoning code update. Because by definition, without opting out, once the state at the end of the year has their regs, somebody will be able to operate here. And so prior to that, we will have the land use issues dealt with, because that's what I was able to gain by not opting out. It's, okay, by definition, they can locate here, we want to regulate where, how, when, you know, all that business. So we're going to be going about that business, and we're going to be doing it in the context of the zoning code rewrite, because we got the consultants here. And whether, in my mind, whether or not we eventually opted out, if it came back, I was going to do this exercise anyways, so that if there is an active opt-out, then you might imagine, well, we don't need any zoning code because we're not going to allow it. Well, I wasn't going to miss this opportunity with the consultant here to have something put together that if that was changed, I could just pull off the shelf and as quickly as possible get inserted into the zoning code. So we're going to be working on zoning with all the requisite inputs and all that. Where should it go? What, you know, all that's going to be going on. And I'm going to be doing that whatever y'all decide on the opt-out question, because it's just a prudent thing to do. The work study sessions, I've picked up uniformly that we want to have one of those. We want to have a panel. We want to have both sides. We want to have law enforcement. In the meantime, take advantage of any podcasts or any other study sessions that you might want to avail yourself of so you can become educated on the subject. The one remaining question I have, now that you know what we're doing, is the resolution to opt out. Right now, I'm not bringing that back forward, which gets to some of what I'm hearing. At the same time, I'm also working on the land use issues, no matter what happens. And so the direction I've gotten is put together a work study session, take care of that. Begin dealing, and what I'm saying is I'm going to be dealing with the land use issue regardless, just because I have to do that. So I'm letting you know that that's being handled. And what I need to know specifically is whether or not you want, as an agenda item in the next couple meetings, another stab at an opt-out resolution with softer language. And if that's the direction, because I know it's kind of split, I'd appreciate real clarity, like, I don't know if a vote's needed, but a show of hands that there's a majority on the board that wants me to bring this thing back. Understanding now that we're going to have a study session, we're working on land use.
I guess I have just one more statement, is that 60% of our voters approved the measure, so I think it's up to, we also have to respect that, and I'm concerned about what message it would send to our voters on the opt-out. I think that we can look at this in July and see where we're at, and if we feel like we're prepared and that's where we want to go, then we can continue moving forward. But we can always have the luxury of making a resolution to buy more time.
I just think it's a prudent thing to do now, and not to go against what the votes were.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a percentage of people in the community too that were against it. The prudent thing to do would just make sure that we're protected in the time that we're evaluating all this. So I hear two definite no's that they don't want to do that. I mean, I think what basically we have to do, what I'm asking for too, is that do we want Mark to go ahead, soften the language in terms of what we had talked about with the semantics and the probation, have an end date attached to the opt-out, and that the Planning Commission would also have then be instructed to begin to look at the zoning ordinances, where, under what circumstances, how it's regulated, et cetera.
And they'll be doing that anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then for us at some point then to opt back in. So this is not contrary. An opt-out at this point, Ben, is not contrary to the vote of the citizens. You still have, the opt-out is only for a temporary period of time for us to get the education, for us to make sure that we have the regulations, for us to make sure that we're ensuring the safety and the well-being of the community, and then we can just opt in. So it allows, there's a flow there, there's a protection, you know.
But nobody can do anything until the state law's written anyway.
Correct.
So, I mean, for a year, nobody can do anything, so opting out is like, you don't have to, is because it's not gonna be done for a year anyway. So it's,
Let's just hear, I mean.
you know, I mean,
I-
that's my thought.
So,
Okay. I was gonna say, I think what he's getting at is not necessarily the fact that opting in or opting out, you know, and the fact that we don't really have to do anything for a year. What I think, if I hear correctly, is he wants to make sure that these people that want to opt in, or you know, that actually want to have a business here, that they're not jumping ahead and buying their land, buying everything that they need in hopes that we're actually going to, you know, opt in and allow it here in Union Township, if I'm hearing that
I mean,
correctly.
either way,
And so,
I'm still gonna go with the votes.
Okay.
right,
Either way.
right,
I
and
mean, you
and
gotta-
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, you know, he's just wanting.
but isn't
to-
that imprudent as a business person? Why in the world would you ever assume?
Yeah. Well, people do.
I mean, these people are
People-
business people. They're
people-
certainly not.
people-
I think,
Not
Ben,
necessarily.
I think one question, Ben, that we need to know, or one answer we need to hear is, Kim, where would you stand on it? We've kind of heard from the other.
I
six.
mean, I would personally probably stand more with the, you know, try to get something opt out so that, yes, we still need to do our research. We still need to, you know, all that stuff that we're already going to be doing, but also that way, you know, like you said, we're still going to listen to the voters, still do that. However, make voters aware that, you know, it could go either way, you know, and so that they're a little more cautious, kind of thing. I mean, that's just my own personal, but.
Ben, I was going to add that it's kind of like mixed signals we're giving potential developers. If we were to say that we are going to opt out for now, it's kind of a mixed signal to developers that we're going to opt out for now, but we're going to lay the groundwork for future activity in this recreational marijuana arena. So that perhaps could do more, create more of a dampening effect on any development potential. Whereas if we just were to move forward with the internal activity of lining our zoning ordinances up with the mandate from the public, that developers would understand that, yeah, there is the potential, rather than some confused half and half story.
Well, I still want to see a date put on it. I'd like to see us go till, I mean, I don't care if Mount Pleasant gets into it. If they get into it, and next March, just say that we start seeing establishments in Mount Pleasant, good, let them do it. Then we can see if there's problems that they have, and I say we opt out till the end of, for a year and a half. I say we opt out until June 30th of 2020.
But what it opt out with
And then reconsider,
or opt in?
reconsider,
Well, you're saying after we get the education.
Right.
And we decide where we want to go as a community.
what Mark said, you know.
Could it also be, Bill, for example, if there was a terminal date that say, if along the way, circumstances are such that we say, you know what?
So
we
up
have
until-
we have our ordinances in place, we're comfortable with this, we think we've gotten the information, we're all set with this, we can make it a go, that we could actually then
Get more education every time.
go ahead of that, for example, have that vote prior. So would you be, so I'm hearing you two saying that you would like to have Mark to go ahead. Tim, how about you? What do you feel about it? I mean, what's your take? I mean, this is a tough one, but again, the opting out wouldn't be terminal.
My position, I believe, is we're kind of in a waiting game for the state to make some rules of engagement. To not have those in place and start allowing things to take place, I think could put us further back than waiting. There's a lot I don't know. For instance, we have medical marijuana and we have recreational marijuana. Would it be possible to be a dispensary and only be allowed to sell either medical or recreational, and then this store could only sell one or the other? Or if you're a dispensary and we've accepted both recreational and medical, do you supply both those types users from? There's just a lot I don't know about, so my position is I believe inevitably at some point in time there will be marijuana sales in our region, whether Mount Pleasant, Union Township, whatever. Is it recreational? Is it medical? Is it both? I think it's going to be very big business. I think it will have monetary consequences to the governmental agencies who are involved with it. So I think it's important for us to learn as much as we can, pros, cons, benefits, negative aspects, be positioned to get involved quickly, but as best as we can do it in a appropriate, logical fashion, that we're not trying to unscramble and redo something. And just be prepared, because I think it's wanted. I think it's certainly needed on the medical side of the program. And I just believe it is probably the biggest economic boom potential in sight.
So at this point, are you saying then you would want Mark to consider going ahead with the opt-out temporarily for the time frame on it?
So if you can help me understand, by doing that, is that changing anything from where we currently stand?
Again, it's not definitive. I mean, we have a lot of questions about it. So I think that for me, the opting out is not because I wouldn't eventually approve it being in the township for certain licensures of the 5 that are there. I'd want to evaluate it all. I'd want to hear the facts. I want to hear the pros and cons. I want to hear safety issues, public safety issues particularly. So I think the opting out simply just gives us, it's saying it's sort of like we're taking a pause. We're evaluating, we're doing our due diligence, and when at a certain date, then as the mandates come down, we have a chance to evaluate, then we move forward. So I don't know, I guess what we have to, Mark has to know one way or the other, maybe in the next couple of weeks to come again with something, and maybe you have a better hand, I don't know if you have a better handle on what we're asking for. Like you said, softer and time limited, and
Norm, you're referring strictly to recreational marijuana.
Correct.
At this
That's
point,
because
right?
the medical, we already have opted out by doing nothing.
No, we didn't do anything either way.
Well,
Well,
I'm gonna wrap
that's the
this
way
up.
the law reads.
Yeah,
so
let's,
it's,
Yeah.
we're
yeah.
kind
The,
of beating a dead horse here
yeah.
at this point.
and so let me take another stab. Yes, medical marijuana is on the books at the state level. It's correct, we have never opted in, so by definition, we're not going to have any medical marijuana establishments in the township. On the other hand, recreational marijuana is now allowed by law. And so you're not gonna need, once these regs are all said and done, a medical marijuana card to get marijuana. You're gonna be able to do it for whatever reason you want. And that's what the voters approved. And the debate at this point is whether or not we want business establishments of whatever sort exists, retail, provisioning, grow, whatever, whether we want those to exist in the township. And as we sit right now with the action taken or not taken, however you want to frame it, by the board, there will be, once the state does their regulations on recreational marijuana, those businesses will be allowed to open up shop here in the township. And I know that at a minimum, we want to regulate where they operate, how they operate, minimum securities, those kinds of things. So we're going to be dealing with the land use, because the playing field right now is we have that the establishments will be able to operate, and so we're going to figure out the land use. The only way that changes is if this body opts out. And as I said earlier, whatever you do on the opt-out, I'm still going to deal with the land use issue. May not be part of our zoning code if the opt-out stays, but it'll be on the shelf so that we can pull it out if this body or another future board changes its mind. So that's what's going on now. And maybe without that this is in no way a vote, because there's not a motion, but maybe if I just go around and say, Trustee Lannon, would you like me to draft a opt-out resolution taking into account some of the things I've heard tonight for this debate to continue at another board meeting?
And I would ask, so as soon as the state puts out their rules, we could see, I mean, as a minimum, I would want to delay long enough to thoroughly digest and understand what the state has to say about things. So opting out to about a period of time of that point would make sense.
And so your date would be beyond the end of the year? Because it'll take that long for the state regs.
That's I don't believe the state will be there
right.
in a year.
Right. Okay. All right. So there's an indication that you would like to have another chance at an opt-out resolution.
Yeah.
I understand there's dates that people would like to have, and that would have to get agreed to, and I don't need the specifics.
So until that point in time when the state has put the rules out, an operation will not be sanctioned by the state.
Will not be sanctioned by the state.
Okay.
But understand, I'm going to still be working on land use documents, because when it is sanctioned by the state, we don't want to wait a whole long period of time before we're regulating it, because in that 2 days, somebody could. Yeah.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. So my position would be
So do you want me to bring a resolution back in the next month?
yes.
Okay. Trustee Micas?
I'd say no.
Okay. Trustee Hauk?
Yes.
Treasurer
Yes.
Rice?
Yes.
Supervisor?
No.
Nope.
Trustee Worley?
Yes.
Okay. So I have an indication, pretty comfortable, that I will bring a resolution back, taking into account what I've heard, and the body will be able to debate that, whether or not they want to adopt it or not, just like make a motion or not, just like we did a couple weeks ago. Is that fair enough?
All right, so that closes item 12. I think we were on item 12 still, were we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
I'm done at this point. So let's make sure that on 13 that we don't
Yes,
readdress this
exactly.
again.
Yeah.
Censorship.
Okay, yeah, well, I got a gavel. Tim?
Well, on a slightly different note, agriculture is something, you know, that's important to our community. A large section of the community is agriculture. And there's a lot of traction being gained in growing of hemp as a product for clothing, fuel, other things. And, you know, that might be something that could be important to our area. And there's been some good strides in that area as far as enticing farmers to grow that crop. Crop insurance is now accepted to be utilized on the growth of hemp. Interstate commerce has been approved. So that's just something to think about that maybe would be coming into this area as the
It's been a
importance
long
of
time, too.
that product
Yeah.
is found.
Isn't it biodegradable too? When the like the fibers from the clothing and stuff, because it's a big thing now is because we're all buying so much clothing, it's going into landfills and
Packaging could be a huge
Yeah.
yeah.
concept
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
product.
There you go. Well, I got 28 acres. I guess that's a good thought for that. I'll talk with Mr. Murphy about hemp.
But you do need to harvest it before it reaches a certain level of THC.
Gotcha. Micus,
I have nothing more to add.
Mr. Howe.
We have 9 acres. I'll sell you, Tim.
So
Backfield. I have nothing.
Kim.
Couple things. First of all, the taxes, February 14th are due. So just a reminder for those that haven't paid their taxes yet. And then the other thing is I'm actually going to be out of the office tomorrow and Friday, and that I'm gonna be out of the area with my son. They're talking possible surgery, so while I'm gone, Mark is gonna be there to sign any checks that need signed, which there shouldn't be, I don't think, but just in case anything comes up in the next 2 days. That's what's going on there. So,
Good luck
Good
with
luck.
that.
thank you.
Dark.
Wish you luck on that. I'll be thinking of you. Other than that, nothing.
Berkeley City. What I said, my brain's numb. I got a cold. I got just 2 things real quick. Water study. I think you were mentioning something about the water study back in December, that you thinking maybe mid this month that it was going to be available or back.
It's still in draft form. We met last week, the large group, and we reviewed a draft report. We're to get comments back to the consultant by the 19th of January. And so it's still under development.
Okay. And then last thing would be Jane Chaffee's position. I wasn't sure where we were at. I know it's kind of crunch time for the assessing department. Are we close? We got a description out, or where are we at with that?
Yeah, the position's been posted. It's been posted internally. It's been posted at a half a dozen professional websites, the Township Assessors Association, Michigan Government Officers Association, Equalization Directors Associations, those kinds of things. It's on our website. The due date for applications, I want to say, is February 4th. So that's
February 1st, you said?
February 1st is what was on the document.
okay. Well, then it's February 1st. I'm just speaking from recollection. So we're awaiting applications to come in, and then we have decided on the interview team, which is the assessor, finance director, building department clerk, and the building official are the interview team. I will be observing that. And so what remains to be done is the development of the interview questions that the team will use, and the development of a scoring matrix that will help them in the evaluation and, you know, filling out. So that's where we're at.
So hopefully
Hopefully
have
that
somebody
helps.
in place by March 1st is what we're hoping, right? We'll have somebody in place for board of review and.
We have an assessor, and my conversations with the assessor is that we're okay. Yeah, they're gonna be working a little harder, a little stressed, all that, but, you know, it goes with the territory. The assistant to the assessor provides support to the board of review, as does the assessor. Neither one of them are on the board of review. So it's my sense that we'll be okay. I have not had any, I've not been approached by the assessor to, in the interim, try to fill anything through like a temp agency or anything to help with data entry or record keeping or filing or any of that, so.
Okay. That's kind of a questionable area anyway, isn't it? Because from my understanding, isn't it, you have to have a certain level of assessing ability in order to be able to be even involved in the data input?
No. There's no requirement for a certification level, for instance.
Okay.
None of the information, to the extent any of the information is not subject to FOIA or protected by laws, you know, like Social Security numbers are, those kind of things
Okay.
would need to happen anyways, even with when Miss Chaffee was here. So.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions at this
Yep.
point in time. So, I see.
I make
no
a
further
motion that
discussion.
I make a motion that we
I
adjourn.
had a-
Support.
Yep. Motion to support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.